It's government and social, and it's July 9th? That doesn't seem possible. Why is July already a third gone? What is this existential crisis that's going into your ear like a carnivorous earwig?
Well, it's the same thing it always is, but minus Krista. Because the reason that July feels like it's slipping away is because everybody's on vacation. Universally.
Oh, would that it be so nice. I made it back. I was out unexpectedly last week.
And yet, we can't put the team together.
It's summertime. No one cares anyway.
Well, some people do care. And that is the people in Washington right now who are in intense panic. So a lot of the government stories are going to be tempered with that, and also just a blizzard of Supreme Court decisions. But first, let's look at something that might be positive for the country.
The AP has the headline, Biden administration provides $504 million to support 12 technology hubs nationwide. Now, I've only been to one of these technology hubs, but Ohio is getting a fair bit of money, California, and the New York I-corridor. Now, the New York I-corridor I've been to. It is very impressive. There's a lot going on there. I was genuinely surprised when Intel wanted to go to Ohio instead of New York. Seems like New York would make a lot more sense. New York State, not the city. But hey, whatever. But everybody's getting 40 to 50 million. So it's like 12 places get $500 million. So it's really, they're spreading it around.
And it's interesting that Microsoft automatically put the Chevron stock ticker on this article, even though it has nothing to do with Chevron, just called that. But that is the big Supreme Court decision that a lot of people are, rending their garments about. It affects everything. It's not necessarily related to technology, but it's going to have impacts here.
The headline is the Supreme Court, they're ruling on Biden policies. It's going to have an impact possibly on Biden policies like net neutrality and the ban on non-compete contracts. And this article talks about all the good stuff. It does not talk about like the ATF, like the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms decides things like a shoestring is a thing that can turn your rifle into an automatic rifle.
Yeah.
And that's like just deciding that that's a thing. It's like, no, you can't. It's got to go through Congress. We need a law for that. So it's a little give and take.
So I know it's not popular to say that both sides are wrong, but yeah, the government was overreaching so much and we can't tolerate it. But we do know that the big tech companies are waiting on the other side and we're in the middle. And this is going to slide the slider much closer to the big tech companies.
Yes. We're going to get screwed no matter what. Like, why is it like this? Why is it that we need to undermine basic language? This word doesn't mean this. It was like, what? How can we function?
It could be just for a little while. You know how when you're in a room that's too cold and then you go outside and it's too hot and you have like a little tiny moment of super comfort? This is basically just we're switching orifices that we're taking it in from government to business.
You can't. And I love how it is a completely failing strategy to just look at it and say, well, there's a bunch of money the taxpayers have paid in order to get, fiber optics to literally every building in America. Every single one. Every outhouse, every office building, every office condo house, whatever. And you look at that and it's like, well, the money's been paid. Where's the deliverables? And they layer on a lot of complexity until the deliverables go away. But you can't just strip all that back and just say, it's like, well, no, the money paid for where is it?
I mean, if we're going to start playing that game, I wouldn't start with fiber optics. I'd start with the Pentagon. Because when it comes to losing money, the ISP's got nothing in the Pentagon.
I mean, if we're going to pay for all this weaponry, it's fine if we can just keep track of it. Like, what did we give away exactly? What do we still have?
I don't think we need to make it. I think that makes enemies amongst the world for us. Another groundbreaking decision, even though they didn't really decide anything, was the social media one. Now, this is interesting. Last week, I'm sure you read this, but you weren't here to discuss it. We had our first driver's license database hack.
Yeah.
So, everybody said, wait a minute, if you keep all these records, how are you going to safeguard them? And the answer that we already knew was, we're not. And this has a big, this flows into that.
Supreme Court orders a new look at social media laws in Texas and Florida. Because if they're going to build a big old giant database, Well, California was selling it. Did you guys talk about how California has been selling that database, but the hack last week was a hack. So it's the same database, two different ways.
Presumably they vet some of those people. This also had to do with whether or not the government can dictate what's on social media. Can social media block certain things? Does free speech land on the side of the social media or on the side of the user? And basically all the Supreme Court did was just kick it back to the states and say, you need a better argument here.
I wonder if the solution is tagging the content itself so that you can do the filtering on your side. Like you can decide. The same way that we have tags in our IP packets. It's like this is video, this is bulk traffic, this is latency sensitive. We could have some more tags that is this is intended for this age group.
Yeah, but people would just abuse it.
Yeah.
This one is kind of the same story. They focus more on the driver's license part.
Supreme Court to hear case on Texas law restricting access to adult material. Is this too invasive? It's like, okay, on the surface, but the implementation is where they get you.
But here's the argument that everybody is ignoring. You're never going to come up with a solution that catches it all. And if kids can see just one instance of it, doesn't that invalidate the whole effort?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
that's impossible.
That's why I think labeling the content would be just as effective and far more privacy respecting. And there's no danger of, the database leaking and then bad things happening as a result of that.
But a lot of people are generating their own content when it comes to that, and they're not going to flag it. They're not going to realize. Then you're going to have an AI in the phone viewing all your videos.
They're working on that.
Yeah, I'm saying, but every solution here is just Orwellian control that's not going to solve the problem.
And then pretty soon the same level of control will go to all of your transactions. And it's like, oh, I see here that you supported the Nabisco conglomeration because you bought Oreos in 1993. What are you thinking? They support third world dictatorships or the Chiquita Banana Company.
You're saying like not the government targeting you, but like these groups.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, you at some point didn't condemn Israel enough, and now we must destroy you. That's becoming a thing. And the Internet Archive is it's under constant siege. And finally, they got to some courts to start making decisions, but it seems the court may be focusing on the wrong thing here.
Appeals court seems lost on how Internet Archive actually harms publishers. So there was a ruling that was expected last Friday. The ruling did not come. And the court was looking at this and they were saying, okay, well, we get what publishers say that they're harmed, but it's wild that the Internet Archive didn't actually use the carve-out in copyright law for libraries. They're allowed to bend, like libraries specifically are allowed to bend the rules a little bit. I don't know if the Internet Archive can get away with that. They were certainly sinning boldly, in my opinion. But the judges were looking at this and saying, well, what was the harm? The Internet Archive is kind of right that there's all these copyrighted works locked up in libraries and they could just loan them out. So, like, what was the harm?
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
If they follow that argument, but they're ignoring a lot of the other arguments. But I guess as long as we get the Internet Archive back. Although that might open it up to future appeals and attacks.
The real danger, the boiling frog here is that we are right on the precipice of media being unobtainable in any kind of format that respects the first sale doctrine. Like, there used to be a click wrap agreement in the early 20th century on books. Once you buy a book, you agree not to resell a book. That's against the first, that's anti-capitalistic, but that's against something called the first sale doctrine, which we talk about a lot. I really don't see a way to have the same level of functionality with digital media. Like, you buy a game or something, you should be able to enjoy it from now until the end of time. Like, I own a bunch of ancient Nintendo games, but Nintendo will do everything that they can to make sure that I can't play those games except on the original hardware. And it's like, I should be able to format shift those. I should be able to ship of Theseus, the thing that plays it, until it's something else.
Yeah, they're not into that.
Yeah.
And everything that has to do with media is going to get more and more gates because they're trying to keep the robots away from it, which will easily keep the humans away from it if they so desire.
Yeah.
And I've been getting a lot. This is surprising to me that he would have time for this, but I've been getting a lot of text messages directly from Donald Trump. He's always looking for money. And what drives me crazy is that Android will flag it as spam, but it'll still notify you.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Where is the feature to say if it is suspected spam, don't tell me?
I think they wrap that up in a system notification.
Yeah.
So you have to mute your system notification. But
It's almost like the people that are designing Android don't actually use Android.
are we blaming the victim here because Android shouldn't have to deal with this kind of thing because someone else should be dealing with it?
The FCC chair asks telecom companies to prove they're actually trying to stop political AI robocalls because would you describe it as a flood of nonsense? It's a lot of calls.
Yeah, it's a lot. So they're saying, hey, we don't think you're actually trying to do this. And I tend to agree with them. The evidence seems to support that, unless the flood is much larger than we ever could imagine.
And the FCC's not asking for much. They're just like, can you give us a couple of page memo on the steps that you've taken, technological and otherwise, to do this? Which, they could send to their IT team and probably get back something in like 4 hours.
Yeah, they don't want that, though. And the AI training is becoming the next battleground. This is definitely going to be the big thing going forward. Who's allowed to scrape the data? How are they allowed to use it? If you create something, how quickly are the robots going to just make it their own? And it seems like most of the big tech companies, again, who are being a bit unbridled in the current political climate, are just making up their own rules.
Google, Snap, Meta, and many others are quietly changing privacy policies to allow for AI training. Imagine that you use Google Drive, and you've got a lot of documents on Google Drive. Wouldn't it be amazing if Google could just use those documents for training their AI? Because how would you know?
Well, we do know. Unfortunately, we know they are doing it. And another big judgment here, and unfortunately this seems once again to fall on the side of the big tech companies.
Federal judge partly blocks U.S. ban on non-competes, setting back the individual. I mean, this is terrible for individual worker rights.
Now, NPR tried to give I guess both sides of the story here. So they showcased a young woman who had a yoga studio, and she trained her yoga instructors with her particular, brand of yoga. And she said she identified that this town didn't have a yoga studio and it would be wildly successful. And it was until a couple of the trainers got together and started a competing yoga studio across town. And she was like, that's not right. I shouldn't have competition, which apparently ignores everything about this country and the fact that benefits the consumers in that town. It's better to have 2 yoga studios, unless you own the first one.
You can also get a business method patent and patents on some of the techniques as well, which is kind of wild.
She didn't invent them.
Well,
yoga. How long's yoga been around? She correctly identified something that was not being served in a community. And then someone else identified, I think there's more room here.
They should have been like the cable companies where you pay for the franchise, the yoga franchise in the city.
And here is something that you all know if you've tried to do any RMAs recently, that the other big tech companies, the hardware companies, are really, really stingy.
The FTC warns 3 PC tech companies of potential warranty violations. So this was Gigabyte, ASRock, and Zotac. It's specifically around stickers, the warranty void if removed stickers. You can have those, but you're not allowed to just void the warranty from the sticker. The point of the sticker is to know if somebody took something apart. So like if you get a game console or like one of the Zotac like portables and it's dead and they get it in and the sticker's intact, they know that you probably didn't take it apart and do something. If the sticker's not intact, they've got to take it apart and figure out if you did anything to break it. They're skipping some steps there and just assuming that you broke it when the sticker is not there, which is not allowed under U.S. law.
There was a couple of other things the other ones did. I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were all very clear anti-consumer violations.
Yeah.
And had to do with you trying to do anything with the thing that you bought. And once again, think of the children. This is just every state a lot of people complained. It was like, hey, if this happens at every state level and not the federal level, then it's going to be a big problem. That turned out to be right. But it seems like, once again, we're trying to do the driver's license thing everywhere.
Mississippi law restricting children's social media use has been blocked because it is a massive expansion of government power, no matter how you cut the cheese.
Yeah, I mean, children probably shouldn't be using social media, but it's not up for Mississippi to make that decision. And deepfakes, should we try to stop them? I probably would have said yes, although I read this explanation and it kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Governor Landry vetoes bill banning deepfakes in Louisiana. Here's why. He said the language is too ambiguous and this is too far overreaching. It would probably land in First Amendment territory, probably wouldn't stand up under scrutiny, and the technology is developing. So while I support the sentiment, it is not well codified in language.
And the language was very broad. It laid out specifics about deepfakes, but then it went a little further. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. It feels like you're just trying to control speech at that point.
There is a lot of echoes. Like if you really earnestly read into the Chevron ruling, I think Legal Eagle did a video on the Chevron ruling that covers a lot of the negative side effects. And you read something like that in the context of the Chevron ruling, it is a little bit of a boiling frog. It's just like, oh, we're going to just slowly close this with more and more ambiguous language, but then it becomes impossible to function.
And this is a recurring theme where our leaders point at China and say, look what they're doing, as they adjust their blinders to be sure not to see what Amazon and Meta and Google and all the other companies are doing.
Arkansas Attorney General warns Temu isn't like Amazon or Walmart. It's a theft business. Clearly, the Arkansas Attorney General has not used the sold by Amazon marketplace because it's.
Also, I think you might have been out for this one too. We learned that Amazon is doing a straight from China discount store.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're basically wanting to become Temu, but he's not complaining about that.
I'm only batting 350 on my AliExpress orders from China, so I don't expect that to be any better.
So he's saying that they sell you these cheap goods at maybe a loss or maybe no profit, just so they can get into your phone and track your data, which is more valuable than whatever you're buying.
Without knowing anything, we suggested that was the case when they were trying to sponsor us. It's like this just doesn't. It literally doesn't make sense.
And this one, to me, this doesn't make sense from an economic perspective. Now, I think there is some quirky math on when this happens and how it happens and when it kicks in. But even then, this seems like an astronomical number.
Uber and Lyft now required to pay Massachusetts rideshare drivers $32 an hour, upwards of $40 an hour. But they're also going to get stipends for health insurance and some other stuff too.
Now, it kicks in when you pick somebody up. So your wait time is never rewarded, right?
Yeah.
Do you understand? Is that how you understood it?
Yeah.
But still, that's a massive, because weren't they getting single digits before this without the fares factored in?
I don't know how. I mean, I really don't know what the math is, because it seems like if you have somebody in your car 50% of the time, you'd be doing really well. And so adjusting for that, your actual hourly wage working 8 hours a day is probably more like $15 an hour.
Now, we did learn last week in New York, Uber was simply cutting you off. So if you were having a real good day, they would just turn you off. So you couldn't hit the number of hours that triggered certain things. So either Delaware and what was the other state? Massachusetts are going to get, it's going to be a place where you can get an Uber anytime that you want, and it's going to become an insanely crowded market, or Uber's going to play these games and the FTC is going to come after them again. The whole thing's going to repeat. But one thing that you cannot do in an Uber and a Lyft, as far as I know, I've actually not tried it, is give them cash. I don't think they play those games because they don't trust the drivers. And it seems that more and more nobody trusts it.
The headline in the CBC News was Canada is sleepwalking into a cashless society, consumer advocates warn. And there's a lot of negativity with cashlessness. We're going to have another story that I want to connect this story to, which is because of the cashlessness and the insufficient security, bad things are happening.
If people are going to sell this idea of catastrophe, climate-driven catastrophe, and the breakdown of the grid because of AI, don't you think cash might be really useful at some point?
I think that argument has been lost and no one will go along with that. But I think that the next best argument is probably, look, these systems are wildly insecure and one day all of your money is just going to disappear. Don't you think you need some sort of token that holds value? A money token, if you will, that you could then convert into goods and services while the technological problem is being solved.
Well, over in the EU, we have Apple just flagrantly disrespecting those MEPs. They don't care about them, and they don't care to even pretend about it.
EU Competition Commissioner says Apple's decision to pull AI from EU shows anti-competitive behavior. What's actually happening is Apple is stalling for time as they attempt to stack the deck in their favor. They're looking to spend money politically and hire focus groups and get people that are sympathetic to what Apple is doing in all levels of government, not just with AI, not just with their data mining, not just with all of that, but also the App Store stuff too. Don't worry. We'll have a story about that.
But it's easy pickings. It's easy for the EU leaders to go after the big tech companies because they're all guilty of the same thing, and they can just extract money from them while we all continue to suffer under their monopolies.
Exclusive. Nvidia is set to face French antitrust charges, sources say. This has to do with the unification of their hardware and software stack to lock you into their AI ecosystem, which I think is kind of bold of the French antitrust folks to be out in front with that.
Well, Nvidia has announced that they're going to do AI cloud.
Yeah.
So they will probably lock that down early and control it.
What's wild to me too is that the narrative, you remember like 5 or 6 years ago when Apple was on the precipice of becoming $1 trillion company, and the conversation was, I'm willing to pay more for Apple because they're not mining my data and they're not doing whatever, so their profit margin can be so insane. And now their profit margin remains insane, but they're also doing the same type of data mining.
And one thing about that data mining, you got to put it all somewhere, right? If they're going to record every single breath and thought that I have, how are you going to store all that? Well, they're looking to the UK. Interestingly, this one was written before the election, and they're saying, hey, if the Labour Party wins, well, guess what happened? And so now if you live in the UK, it seems like you're going to get data centers like we have dollar stores over here.
Britain's brewing battle over data centers. The Labour Party, which is leading the UK's election polls, has proposed making it easier for companies to build new server farms, risking a new type of conflict with communities across the country. I actually think this is probably a good thing for Britain. Colder climate is great, and also some of the more rural areas of the UK, you can have like a biomass reactor. It doesn't smell great, but that's a free, easy way to generate electricity if you otherwise have a lot of agricultural waste happening around the biomass reactor. So that's free electricity. That sounds good. So it's conveniently located to reach a lot of places.
Except you've got that whole EU-UK cross-border issue to worry about.
A little bit. It's probably, you can probably weaponize the fact that the UK is not in the EU anymore, and data center people are probably, it's like, oh, it's in Europe, but it's not in the EU, but the data never really leaves Europe. So that's cool, right? We all know everybody in the UK. That's good, right?
Also, I don't know how hard it would be, but I imagine the new leadership is going to try to get them back, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
I mean, for sure they want that. Now, one of the things about computer science that's always been a joke, if you were in the computer science department, is that not a lot of girls. Very small amount of girls. I remember I had one class and this like sorority girl walked in and we all looked and were like, what? And she turned and looked at the room number and then walked back out. Because that's how it is. It seems in recent time it's been getting better, but then they made some changes in the curriculum.
Number of girls in England taking computing GCSE it plummets, a study finds. The article suggests the reason is because it's too hard. I suspect there are other reasons.
Well, I don't think it's so much too hard. It's just that you now have the option of taking an easier route.
Oh, yeah.
And most kids will just do that.
That's not good.
Because there are some intimidating classes that are part of the computer science curriculum.
It is a little bit of a paradox, though, don't you think? If you're told that you're you're gifted and you're special and that you have special talents the whole time and everything comes easily to you. And then it's like, here is something a little harder. And it's like, oh, I don't think I like this.
But that's a thing, right? Because like, if school is easy for you, you never learn the tools to do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And then you hit that wall.
Yeah.
And then you have to try to deal with that.
Thus the paradox.
Yeah. So
Thus the path to idiocracy.
And the cops are upset because there's some interesting new technology that's supposed to bring the EU together, because everybody's got a mobile phone. You go to a new country. You've talked about how it's a hassle when you went to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And they want to make that easier, but the cops are like, wait a minute, with all these data laws, we don't know about this.
Europol says that mobile roaming tech is making it too hard to do its job. And if you peel back the layers of the onion in this article, it is because of encryption. They don't want to have encryption on either side, which is insane. So when you take your phone and you go somewhere else, it establishes an encrypted tunnel back to wherever you're from. And so if the police in the local area that you're at are investigating a crime, they can't get as much information from your phone as they can from the locals, because the data for your phone is stored with wherever you're from instead of wherever you are.
And they can't get like a subpoena or whatever to go after it because they don't have any jurisdiction over it. That data's in your country. And they hate that.
So the answer is no encryption for anybody, which is wild. We shouldn't do that. That's a terrible idea. If you want a preview of how that works out, you should do your homework and look into Las Vegas and the telephone network in Las Vegas in the Kevin Mitnick days, because all of that was basically controlled by the cartels. Like the criminals controlled everything, and so when somebody would call certain services, the mafia or whatever would route those calls to specific companies that paid protection money. And it was wild. Wild times.
They had a thing like that in Rome, too.
Yeah.
Toward the end. And the Swiss are doing something once again. I feel like if you're giving me cataclysmic predictions about the fall of our civilization, this is going to make things a lot harder when we try to rebuild.
Swiss Broadcasting Corporation to pull the plug on FM radio. This is analog FM radio. Fortunately, I think we could probably build an FM transmitter out of some failed toasters and used rubber bands, but still, the analog FM radio is going away in Swiss Broadcasting. Digital is still okay, just not analog.
To be fair, I never turn on the radio.
just you turn it like everything is dead and the electricity's off. It's like, maybe I should turn on the battery operated radio. I'll just go back to bed. It'll be fine when I wake up.
Yeah. You know what? I'll just look at the sky, and if it turns black, I'll go to the basement. The German military has outsourced, as we always do, to get things into space. And this time it wasn't the rocket that got them up there. They're up there. It was the people that built the satellites that seems to be introducing some issues.
Two of the German military's new spy satellites appear to have failed in orbit. Well, they haven't failed completely. It's just that the radio that they were supposed to have doesn't work. These are satellites that can do, among other things, really high-resolution radar tracking. But in order to do that, they have to synchronize a certain way, and there's 3 of them, and they're not synchronizing properly. But the way the contract was written, the German military people said that, hey, if these don't work according to spec, we don't have to buy them. They're going to have to make some more.
They can't unfurl their solar panels, so they can't do anything. And some people in this article, I can't remember who they were quoting, but someone said they never tested the motors that open the solar panels.
Oops.
How could you skip that part?
This could also be an amazing counterintelligence operation. Just like all those satellites we launched, they don't work at all. Oops.
Oh my God. And we are not the only ones here in America who are doing these stupid things when it comes to protecting the kids and locking down social media. It's worldwide.
Spain introduces a passport to stop kids from watching adult material because they see the opportunity that level of corruption will provide.
My favorite thing about this is you get tokens. And do you feel, they didn't really make it clear, do you think that's per site?
I don't know.
You get 30 per month. If you feel like you need more, you have to go into the app and request more, and someone has to approve that. I don't know if that's one per day, I guess is
The 18-year-old high school students are going to have an amazing, profitable side business.
selling unused tokens.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a marketplace. There should be. And it's been a nonsense story over and over. Year after year, they always come back and this is an easy story to write because they keep doing this silly thing, but no more.
Japan declares victory in an effort to end government use of floppy disks. We've reported on this in the nonsense section several times about people getting into impossible situations because they were not able to find a computer that had a floppy drive. No more.
You know, there's one company that was making floppies and selling them at an insane margin. It's because they were the only one making them, and they knew the government was a buyer that was always going to be there.
I found a box of 1.44 meg, 3.5 inch 3M floppies in the basement, still in the shrink wrap, and it's like, is this worth thousands of dollars now? Like, what's going on with this?
And China, as we know, is really ramping up to do AI because they were a little bit behind, and the government stepped in and said, as usual, we're going to subsidize everything. But that's not the only dystopian new technology that they're looking to subsidize.
China plans broader push to develop tech like Musk's Neuralink.
And if you're following that to its logical conclusion in your head and you're thinking, oh, the CCP is going to be reading minds, that's not going to go well.
It'll be fine.
Do you think you could force your mind to be like pro-government to try to protect yourself from the jackboots?
I thought about, I went to a much darker place than that, which is the people that are forced to donate kidneys are probably going to be forced to participate in this as well.
Yeah, that's how they're going to pick who donates the kidneys. And Indonesia lost their internet to a malware ransomware attack. And some people started asking a lot of uncomfortable questions, which seem to have really uncomfortable answers.
Indonesia president orders audit of data centers after cyber attack. With this new SSH hack that we're going to talk about later, there's going to be some uncomfortable truths. Kind of a lot of uncomfortable truths.
Well, the first one we've already discovered, no backups. They didn't keep backups. And this is one that we see pretty much every week. The government may change, the company may change, but the story is always the same.
It's 2024, and Apple has removed VPN apps from the App Store. Not for China, but from the Russian App Store, because apparently Apple still cares.
I mean, they do every country. They do what every country says. Although they fight the American government pretty hard. And country by country, we are also seeing more and more rules about mining data for AI. And everybody has a different idea. It seems like if you're not a incredibly rich country who's reaping all these benefits, it's a pretty simple decision.
Brazil data regulator bans Meta from mining data to train AI models.
Because that doesn't benefit Brazil at all, does it? There's no benefit to the Brazilians. It's simply just using them. And Meta, taking a page from the old Apple playbook, is fighting with the EU.
Meta defends charging fee for privacy amid showdown with the EU. I thought this would be some sort of hilarious, like the EU just being the EU again. But the EU asked Meta, it's like, okay, can you, if you're trading data for privacy, can you tell us which data and how much each piece of data is worth? Like, can you give people the option to share some bits of data and others? And Meta was like, what? No, we can't do that at all.
Well, they could, but they don't want to. And Meta, it seemed when the whole federated social media came about, I thought they would never really do anything with it, because why would they? It would destroy their business model. But they are making tiny baby steps, it seems.
Meta is connecting Threads more deeply with the Fediverse in hopes to unseat Elon Musk's X, which is kind of sort of making some not quite dead yet wheezing noises.
More deeply, meaning they gave you the basic functionality that all social media has and has had for decades.
If you're not read in on the Fediverse and what that means, it means that these companies have built a protocol that theoretically Threads and X and all these other messaging applications could work as a public square, meaning that the messages that you post in one place can propagate everywhere else. And that means that when you're using X, you're not just on X. And so you're not in a situation where social media is locked up in just one company, which is probably not a bad thing in theory. It's just the implementation still leaves a lot to be desired.
Like basic features, but they have added a couple more.
Yeah.
More to come, I guess. And modern cars have a pretty poor reputation for reliability and certainly price. Price is a big one. And a lot of people are going backwards to get older cars. Let me give you another great reason to do that.
It has officially happened. A mechanic says that he cannot work on your car because they've officially been locked out of the computer systems. It shows him trying to get into a 2024 Dodge something or other.
Ram.
It was a Dodge Ram. And he's just, the computer system will not give me any info other than basic info. I have no idea what's wrong.
Now, we've seen this from John Deere.
Yeah.
They get away with it. There's been some pushback from the government, but currently, right now, still getting away with it. And it seems like all the car companies will similarly continue to get away with this.
It seems like economic forces would put us in a spot where you're going to have like, the armored roll cage for crash protection just bolted to a frame with 4 wheels and a steering wheel. Like, I just want a motor and a steering wheel and 4 wheels and the safety cage. I'm not interested in any other features.
That would be an emissions nightmare. I cannot tolerate that. Did you see, I think you were gone also last week, the Linux car operating system has been approved.
Yeah, IBM got the approval, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So, roll your own car?
Linux is safe enough to keep you safe in a car, although...
Unless you need SSH.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a problem. Hey, the first vulnerability in 20 years. It's not bad.
Well, the deepfake solution, right now, political attempts seem to be very poorly done and not helpful. But maybe, what if we just added another AI to the mix, right? That's always the solution.
YouTube now lets you request removal of AI-generated content that simulates your face or voice.
Detected by AI.
There's for the influx of new subscribers, there's a lot of people that say I sound like Seth Rogen or Neil deGrasse Tyson, and so it's just like how long before the AI is like, stop doing that? And it's like
your voices. What about the Scarlett Johansson thing?
Yeah, because that was a different actress.
But we also learned that it doesn't even sound as much like her as other popular actresses.
Yeah.
What's YouTube going to do in that situation? Now, the other thing that if you ever posted a YouTube video is that if there is even a hint of copyright material in there, boy, are they quick to find it and knock you right down. But now they say they have a better solution.
YouTube's updated eraser tool removes copyrighted music without impacting other audio.
They say it's not 100%, but if it fails, you will just get muted. You will not get copyright violations.
I remember there was a podcast that I happened to hear, and I think it was like Mr. Beast or somebody said that he accidentally said one line of one lyric, and somebody manually was like, oh, that's a copyright claim. And he's just like, I can't. I just clipped out that 1 second or 2 seconds because that's just so overreaching. It's crazy.
What a terrible cookie pop-up this one has. And we've heard from our leaders about the whole China apps thing, Temu, TikTok. And we've also heard from our leaders about our own social media apps and how they have the addictive algorithm. Here's a young lady who is approaching it from an interesting vector. She's not denying it.
Angela Zhang, the professor. In China, the addiction apps of things like TikTok, Temu, or Shine have been driven to perfection. And she goes on to say it's like the application limits how much exposure you can have based on your age or based on your classification. And you're not supposed to use it for so many hours. But it's pretty easy to get around those limitations.
But she doesn't condemn it as like... Although she did say she would not ever try to say the things that she's saying in China. And she hopes no one ever translates it. Because she doesn't want that to get into the censorship system. But she's not against it as hard as our leaders are. But it does point out, when you have a government who is in league with social media and controlling it in many ways, which, we kind of got that, it gets refined.
I like the inept version of that, where the attempts at control are transparent and ridiculous.
They still worked. But yeah, it seems that If you just play ball with the government and let them have a part of it, then they'll let you do what you want, and you can make the most addictive apps that the world has ever seen, which is what we need more of, apparently. What we need is someone to say bye, but we have no one. RIP.
Bye.